"I can't carry a child," she wept. The mountain man growled, "Then carry my heart instead." The wind didn't howl, it screamed. It tore through the broken cabin like a thing alive, rattling the hinges of the door, whipping dust into Clara Whitfield's eyes until she could no longer tell if the grit was from the storm, or from the dead. She didn't mean to come here. The trail had led her off course, 3 days of walking since the last wagon train left, since the fever took her husband, since the baby stopped crying. Now, she stood in the doorway, boots caked with dried mud and something darker. Her fingers curled around the rifle slung across her back. She hadn't fired it in weeks. Not since the night she buried John. But the smell hit her first. Bread. Not fresh. Not even close. Old. Hardened. Stale as regret. And then she saw him. He lay curled beside the cold hearth, wrapped in a wool blanket stained with dirt and rust-colored streaks. His face was sunken, lips cracked open like dry riverbeds. One arm cradled a loaf, half-eaten, crust blackened, crumbs clinging to his beard like ashes. His chest rose. Slow. Shallow. Like a bell tolling for someone who'd already been buried. Clara stepped forward. The floor groaned beneath her. His fingers twitched. Not enough to wake. But enough to clutch the bread tighter. A revolver lay just beyond his reach, nickel-plated, barrel worn smooth by thumb and sweat. A sheriff's badge dangled from his belt, half hidden under blood-soaked cloth. The metal gleamed faintly in the gray light filtering through the shattered window. She knelt. Her knees sank into the dust. She reached for his wrist. Cold. Too cold. Then, warmth. A pulse. Faint. Like a mouse running under snow. She pulled her hand back. Save him. The thought came unbidden. Leave him. Outside, the wind screamed again. Somewhere in the distance, a single gunshot echoed. Then silence. She looked at the bread. Then at his face. And remembered the last time she'd eaten. 3 days ago. She'd fed her daughter first. Then herself. Then nothing. She swallowed hard. The taste of ash still lingered on her tongue. He wasn't a thief. Thieves stole food to live. This man had starved so someone else could eat. She peeled back the blanket. His side was raw, bullet wound, old but festering. Rags bound it, soaked through with pus and dried blood. His right hand. God, his hand. A scar ran from knuckle to wrist. Deep. Clean. Like a brand. Not from a knife. From fire. Or iron. She touched it. His breath hitched. His eyes fluttered open. Just a sliver. Blue. Like winter sky before the snow falls. He stared at her. No fear. No rage. Just, recognition. As if he'd known she'd come. As if he'd been waiting. Clara whispered, voice cracking like dry wood, "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Didn't move. Only his fingers tightened around the bread. One final squeeze. Then he went still. Again. She didn't know if he was dying. Or if he was praying. Outside, the wind dropped. For the first time in days. Silence. Real silence. The kind that makes your bones ache. She reached into her sack. Took out the last of her water. Dripped it onto his lips. One drop. Then another. His throat moved. Just once. And then, slowly, his eyelids closed. She didn't leave. She couldn't. The child's boot beside the bed told her why. Small. Leather split. Toe bent inward. Like someone had kicked it off in a hurry. Like someone had run. Clara lifted it. Smelled it. Milk. Sweat. Earth. And underneath, something sweet. Cinnamon. She knew that scent. Her daughter used to wear it. In her hair. Before the fever. Before the silence. She pressed the boot to her chest. Tears came then. Hot. Silent. They fell onto the dead man's blanket. And for the first time since the world ended, she didn't feel alone. Wind howls. For 7 days, Silas Boone did not speak. Not a word. Not a groan. Not even a sigh. Clara watched him like a mother watches a child learning to breathe. He lay on the cot in the corner of her cabin, the same one her husband had slept in before the fever took him. The same one their daughter, Eleanor, had curled into the night she stopped crying. Silas didn't move much. Just enough to shift when the pain came. Just enough to turn his head when she entered the room. His wound had stopped bleeding by the 3rd day. The fever broke on the 5th. But his tongue stayed still. Clara spoke to him anyway. She told him about John, how he'd stolen bread from the storehouse in Fort Worth just so she could eat. How the sheriff's men dragged him out at dawn, rope around his neck, and how John never begged. Just looked at her through the crowd and smiled. Like he knew she'd understand. She told him about Eleanor. How she'd hummed lullabies while rocking her. How she'd pressed her nose against the window every morning, waiting for the sun to rise. How she died with her fingers curled around a dried rose. Silas listened. Always. Eyes open. Staring past her. Past the walls. Past the grave outside. Sometimes, when the fire burned low, Clara would catch him watching her sleep. Not with hunger. Not with threat. With something worse. Grief. Like he'd seen it before. And knew it by heart. On the 4th night, she woke to the sound of scratching. She sat up. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards. Silas was sitting upright. One hand pressed to his side. The other was tracing shapes in the dust. She held her breath. He drew a circle. Then a line. Then another circle. A face. 2 dots for eyes. A curve for a mouth. A child. He stopped. Looked at her. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached into his coat pocket. Drew out a single thing. A dried rose. Petals brittle as old paper. Color long faded to rust. He placed it gently in her palm. His fingers brushed hers. Cold. Shaking. Not from pain. From memory. Clara stared at the flower. She knew this scent. She'd smelled it on Eleanor's hair. Before the fever. Before the silence. Her throat tightened. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Silas didn't answer. He closed his eyes. And when she looked again, his hand was trembling. Not from weakness. From guilt. On the 6th day, he stood. For the first time since she found him. He moved slow, like bones were made of glass. He limped to the wash basin. Poured water over his face. Wiped it with a rag. Then turned to her. His beard was wild now. Hair matted with dirt. But his eyes, they were clear. Like a man who'd finally remembered his name. He walked to the door. Opened it. Wind rushed in. Carrying the smell of pine and distant rain. He stepped outside. Didn't look back. Clara followed. He knelt beside the small mound of earth behind the cabin. The grave. He pulled something from his boot. A knife. Small. Sharp. He dug. Not deep. Just enough. Then he placed something inside. A silver spoon. Polished. Old. Engraved with initials, e.g. Clara's breath caught. That was Eleanor's spoon. The one she'd buried with her. The one she'd sworn no one else would ever touch. He covered it. Patted the dirt. Then stood. Turned to her. Still silent. Still broken. But his hands. They reached for her. Not to strike. Not to steal. To hold. She stepped back. I don't know who you are, she said. His lips parted. Nothing came out. Then, slowly, he lifted his right hand. The scarred one. Turned it palm up. In the moonlight, the mark was plain. Not a brand. A wound. Burned into flesh. A shape. A cross. And beneath it, letters. Tiny. Faded. But legible. J.W. John Whitfield. Her husband. Her dead man. Her killer. Or, her savior. Silas lowered his hand. Looked at the grave. Then at her. And for the first time since she'd found him. He spoke. One word. Voice cracked like dry timber. Forgive. Then he turned. Walked back inside. Closed the door. Left her standing there. Alone. With a corpse's name carved into a stranger's skin. And a spoon buried under her daughter's earth. That night, Clara dreamed of fire. Of a man screaming. Of a child laughing. And of a woman, dressed in white, kneeling in the snow, holding a loaf of bread, and weeping. When she woke, the cabin was cold. Silas was gone. Only his boots remained. By the door. Filled with fresh dirt. And resting atop them, a note. Written in charcoal. On the back of an old train ticket. You gave me bread. I gave you truth. Find me where the mountain sings. S.B. Clara picked up the note. Touched the ink. It was still warm. Outside, the wind carried the faintest echo of a whistle. A train. Far off. Coming. Or going. She didn't know which. But she knew one thing. He hadn't come here to die. He'd come here to be found. And now. She had to decide, was he the devil? Or the angel who'd taken her husband's place? Train whistle fades into distance, the knife slid between her ribs like a secret. Clara didn't scream. She didn't even gasp. She just stopped breathing, for one long, silent moment, as the blade found its home beneath her left breast. Not to kill. To retrieve. She'd hidden it there 3 years ago, the day she married John Whitfield. The day he kissed her forehead and whispered, "If I die before you, don't trust anyone who says they knew me." She hadn't understood then. Now, she did. The letter was stitched into the lining of her wedding corset, thin as spider silk, soaked in salt water and sweat, sealed with wax that had cracked over time. She'd worn it every day since. Even when the fever took Eleanor. Even when the wind stole her voice. Even when Silas Boone lay dying on her cot. She tore it free. The fabric split with a sound like a sigh. And there it was. The letter. Brown with age. Stained dark at the edges. Not with ink. With blood. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was familiar. John's hand. Bold. Quick. Slight tilt to the right, always when he was angry. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. And the man you saved? He's the one who killed me. Don't weep for me. Weep for what comes next. They came for me because I stole bread. That's what they told the crowd. But you know better. You saw the sheriff's men drag me out not for hunger, but for truth. I found his ledger. The one buried under the floorboards of Fort Worth's courthouse. Names. Dates. Payments. Men paid to let children starve so their masters could grow fat. I copied them. Took them to the telegraph office. Tried to send word east. They caught me before I could post it. He was the one who signed my death warrant. His name is Silas Boone. Deputy. Enforcer. Executioner. He doesn't wear a badge anymore. Not since the night he burned his own hands to hide the mark of his sin. He walks now as a ghost, but he remembers every face he's silenced. He didn't come here to beg mercy. He came here to find you. Because he knows you're the only one who can forgive him. Or bury him. God help us both. J.W. Clara dropped the letter. It landed on the floor beside the cold hearth. Her hands shook. Not from fear. From rage. From betrayal. From the terrible, grinding weight of knowing, he knew. Silas knew. He'd known all along. That's why he didn't speak. That's why he traced her daughter's face in dust. That's why he gave her the rose. That's why he carried the spoon. He didn't come to die. He came to be judged. And she, stupid, grieving, broken Clara, had fed him. Tended his wounds. Cradled his head like he was holy. She stood. Walked to the window. Looked out. Moonlight painted the earth silver. And there, just beyond the fence, he stood. Silas. Barefoot. In his shirt. No coat. No hat. Just the scarred hand resting on the gatepost. Watching her. Waiting. As if he'd known she'd read it. As if he'd wanted her to. She didn't run. Didn't scream. Didn't reach for the rifle. She walked outside. Barefoot. Cold earth bit into her soles. Wind lifted her hair. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just looked at her. Eyes hollow. Eyes full. I didn't kill him, he said. She didn't answer. He didn't expect her to. The ledger wasn't about bread, he said. It was about children. 5 of them. Starved to death in the county orphanage. Their names, written down. Paid off by men in suits. Men who wore fine coats and called themselves citizens. He swallowed. I was the one who buried them. Clara's breath hitched. You were the deputy. I was the one who signed the orders. He lifted his hand, the scarred one. Turned it toward the moon. The cross. The initials. J.W., I burned myself, he said. So no one would see the brand they put on me after I refused to sign the second list. After I tried to save the last girl. She was 8. Had your eyes. Clara looked at him then. Really looked. Not at the scar. Not at the gun. Not at the badge that wasn't there anymore. At his eyes. They weren't hollow anymore. They were full. Full of grief. Full of love. Full of something worse. Hope. I didn't want to save you, she said quietly. He nodded. I know. I wanted to bury you. He didn't flinch. I deserve it. She turned away. Looked at the horizon. Where the clouds gathered like a crowd. They're coming, he said. She didn't ask who. She already knew. The men from Fort Worth. The ones who paid for silence. The ones who made sure no one ever spoke of the orphanage. The ones who sent Silas out here to die. Because he remembered. Because he cared. Because he was the only one left who could name them. He reached into his coat. Drew out a folded paper. Handed it to her. It was a land deed. Signed. Witnessed. Notarized. In John Whitfield's name. And beneath it, a single line, written in ink so fresh it still shimmered, to Clara Whitfield, for bread given, truth told, and love returned. Her breath caught. You stole this? No, he replied. I earned it. He pulled a second document from his pocket. A death certificate. For John Whitfield. Signed by a sheriff long dead. Stamped with an official seal. Cause of death, natural causes. Liar. She looked at him. Why give this to me? He looked at the grave. Because you're the only one left who remembers her real name. He paused. Then added, softly, and because I can't carry her anymore. He knelt. Placed the revolver gently on the ground. Then, slowly, he unbuttoned his shirt. Bared his chest. There, centered over his heart, a new mark. Fresh. Red. Raw. Carved into flesh. Not with a knife. With his own fingernails. 5 letters. Each one deep. Each one bleeding. Elize. His daughter's name. The one they took. The one he never stopped mourning. He looked back at her. Eyes wet. Eyes full. And for the first time since she met him. He smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a broken one. A real one. The kind that comes when you've carried the weight long enough, and someone finally says, I'll carry it with you. I don't need your forgiveness, he said. I need you to remember. Then he stood. Walked into the storm. No hat. No boots. No weapon. Just the man who'd buried too many children. Who'd carried too much guilt. Who'd loved too deeply. Who'd been broken, and still chose to kneel. Clara didn't move. Didn't call out. Didn't cry. She watched him go. Until the rain swallowed him whole. And then, slowly, she picked up the revolver. Turned it in her hands. Felt its weight. Its history. Its sin. She walked to the grave. Kneeled. Pressed the barrel of the gun into the soft earth. Then, with both hands, she began to dig. Not deep. Just enough. To bury the revolver. Beside Eleanor. Beside the spoon. Beside the rose. Beside the bones. She didn't say a prayer. Didn't whisper a name. Just closed the hole. Patted the dirt. Stood. Turned. And walked back inside. The cabin smelled of wet wool and burnt wood. She lit the lantern. Sat in John's chair. Opened the letter again. Read it once more. Then she held it to the flame. Watched it burn. Ashes drifted to the floor. Like snow. Like tears. Like ghosts. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, silence. And then. A sound. Soft. Faint. Like a child humming. Clara froze. Listened. It came again. From the porch. She opened the door. Rain lashed her face. There, huddled beneath the eaves, was a small figure. Wrapped in a blanket. Face hidden. Tiny hands clutching a dried rose. Clara stepped forward. Voice trembling. Eleanor. The child looked up. Eyes wide. Dark. Alive. And in her arms, a doll. Made of rags. One button eye. Smiling. Clara fell to her knees. Tears poured. Not from grief. From wonder. From terror. From grace. Who are you? She whispered. The child didn't answer. Just reached out. And placed the rose in Clara's palm. Then she leaned forward. And kissed Clara's cheek. Cold. Sweet. Real. And then, she vanished. Into the rain. Gone. Like smoke. Like a dream. Clara sat there. Holding the rose. Holding the memory. Holding the truth. He hadn't died. He hadn't run. He'd given her back what he couldn't keep. And now. The mountain had spoken. Not in thunder. Not in fire. But in a child's kiss. Wind fades. Rain stops. A single bell tolls, distant, church-like. The snow came the week after the men left. Not in flurries. Not in whispers. But in a slow, silent siege, white and heavy, swallowing the earth, burying the graves, muffling the world until even the wind forgot how to scream. Clara didn't leave the cabin. Didn't tend the fire. Didn't eat much. She just sat. In John's chair. Holding the doll. The one the child left. One button eye. Rag body stitched with thread that smelled like cinnamon. She hadn't washed it. Didn't want to. Because if she did, maybe the scent would fade. And then she'd wonder if she'd dreamed it. Every night, she whispered Eleanor's name. Every morning, she placed a fresh loaf of bread on the porch. Just like he used to. Just like she remembered. She didn't know if he was dead. Didn't know if the girl was real. Didn't know if God had gone quiet, or if he'd finally learned to speak in silence. Then, on the 7th day of snow, when the world was so still she could hear her own heartbeat echo in her ribs, she woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Unsteady. On the porch. She didn't reach for the rifle. Didn't hide. Didn't pray. She stood. Walked to the door. Opened it. Snow fell like feathers. And there he was. Silas Boone. Barefoot. Half buried in white. His coat torn. His beard frozen solid. His scarred hand clutching a bundle wrapped in wool. He looked at her. Not with hope. Not with fear. With something deeper. Recognition. Like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. You came back, she said. He didn't answer. Just stepped forward. One slow step. Then another. His boots were gone. His toes blackened with frost. Blood smeared the snow behind him. He collapsed at her feet. Not from weakness. From surrender. Clara knelt. Lifted his head. His breath came shallow. Thin. Like a candle about to gutter. She touched his face. Cold. So cold. She pulled him inside. Wrapped him in quilts. Fed him broth, warm, salty, thick with barley. He didn't open his eyes. Didn't speak. But when she pressed the cup to his lips, his fingers curled around hers. Just once. Then let go. She stayed with him. For 3 days. 3 nights. No sleep. No food. Just warmth. Just hands. Just silence. On the 4th morning, his eyelids fluttered. Opened. Blue. Clear. Alive. He looked at her. Not as a stranger. Not as a killer. Not as a ghost. As a mother. Eleanor, he whispered. Her breath caught. She's gone, Clara said. He shook his head. Slow. Deliberate. No, he reached into the bundle. tugged free a small leather pouch. Inside, not bones. Not letters. A lock of hair. Blonde. Soft. Still smelling of cinnamon. And beneath it, a slip of paper. Written in charcoal. She called me Papa. You're the only one who remembers her name. Now I give you mine. SB Clara stared. Tears spilled over. Hot. Silent. She reached out. Took his hand. The scarred one. Turned it palm up. Looked at the wound. The cross. The initials. JW. She traced them with her thumb. Then, slowly, she lifted her other hand. Pressed her own palm against his. Side by side. Her skin smooth. His, cracked and marked. I don't care what they called you, she whispered. I don't care what you did. She squeezed. Hard. Who are you now? He looked at her. Eyes wet. Eyes full. And for the first time since she met him. He smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a broken one. A real one. The kind that comes when you've carried the weight long enough, and someone finally says, I'll carry it with you. I'm Silas, he said. And you're Clara. He paused. Voice barely above a breath. And we're, her parents. The fire popped. Snow fell outside. And for the first time since the world ended, the cabin felt like home. He didn't get better. Not fully. The fever returned on the 5th night. He shivered. Mumbled names. Eleanor. Lizzie. Tommy. All the children. All the ones he buried. Clara held him. Sang the lullaby Eleanor used to love. The one John had taught her. Soft. Broken. True. He slept. And when dawn came, pale and thin as old lace, he was gone. Not quietly. Not peacefully. But with his hand still clasped in hers. His last breath fogged the air. And then, nothing. Just silence. And the smell of burning pine. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't beg God to bring him back. She just kissed his forehead. Wiped the snow from his lashes. Pulled the quilt tight around him. Then walked outside. To the grave. Where 2 mounds lay under snow. One small. One large. She dug. Not with a shovel. With her hands. Frost bit her nails. Wind stole her breath. But she kept going. Until the hole was deep enough. She laid him beside Eleanor. Side by side. Like they were meant to be. Then she took the silver spoon. And carved their names into the driftwood cross. Eleanor Grace Whitfield Silas Boone. She didn't say a prayer. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't beg for mercy. She just stood. And whispered, You gave me bread. You gave me truth. You gave me my daughter. And now, she placed the dried rose on his chest. You gave me a heart. She turned. Walked back inside. Lit the lantern. Sat in John's chair. Held the doll. And waited. For the snow to stop. For the wind to remember its voice. For the mountain to speak again. It did. At dusk. Not with thunder. Not with wind. But with a single note. High. Clear. Sweet. Like a child singing. Clara froze. Listened. The song drifted through the trees. Through the snow. Through the walls. It wasn't a lullaby. It was a hymn. One she'd never heard before. But somehow, she knew it. She knew it because Eleanor used to hum it. Before the fever. Before the silence. Before the world broke. Clara stood. Walked to the window. Opened it. Snowflakes landed on her tongue. Cold. Sweet. Real. And far off, beyond the ridge, where the mountain rose like a sleeping giant. She saw him. Silas. Standing. Alone. In the storm. No coat. No boots. No scars. Just a man. Smiling. Looking down. At her. At the cabin. At the graves. And then, he raised his hand. Not in farewell. In blessing. And the mountain answered. With a sigh. With a song. With a whisper. That echoed in her bones. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're a mother. Clara closed the window. Saturday. Held the doll. And cried. For the first time in years. Not from grief. From grace. From love. From a man who gave everything. And asked for nothing. Except to be remembered. As someone worth loving. Train whistle fades into silence. 2 weeks later, a traveler found the cabin. Empty. Clean. Warm. A loaf of bread on the porch. Fresh. Still steaming. 2 graves. Marked with wood. One name carved twice. And on the sill, a single rose. Dried. But perfect. And beside it, a note. In charcoal. She didn't need a husband. She didn't need a savior. She needed a mother. And I gave her mine. S.B. The traveler took the note. Put it in his pocket. Left the bread. And walked away. He never told anyone what he saw. Never spoke of the woman. Or the man. Or the child who sang in the wind. But every year, on the anniversary of the first snow, he leaves a loaf of bread. On a porch. In the mountains. And waits. Just in case. Someone answers.